writing all the time. Watch how people communicate complicated concepts with an image. Because that's what screenwriting is really all about. Letting the camera tell the story and you giving the camera as few words as possible to create the kind of poetry that you've envisioned in your mind. It's storytelling with imagery. It's a very specific kind of writing. I have to tell you, poetry and Shakespeare taught me about that kind of writing. That and working on the film Mother of George, which Simon Says Entertainment produced. And the first time I read that script, I was like, oh my God, this is beautiful. It has to happen now. The writing and the images were amazing. And it was a little over 80 pages long. But I saw the world. I felt by the smells and textures and colors of the world and how simply everything was communicated and the sparseness of the relationships. I felt and I saw the world long before it had been created. And that was in the writing. And I was like, I want to write great writing. So only watch good writing. If I'm watching something on TV and it's bad writing, I turn the channel. I read great writers. I read Jhumpa Lahiri. I don't want to write a novel, but I do understand that great novelists are communicating thousands of years of ideas in 100 pages. That's hard. They create entire worlds. It's amazing with texture and detail, far more texture and detail than a camera does, but they're still reducing ideas down the way they use sentences, the way the characters communicate their psychology to each other, even when they're not directly saying what they want. And screenwriting is just like that. Just like that. That's why Stephen King, I love his book on writing. You should read it. Stephen King talks about one thing that I can give you as a hint to take away from today. He goes into a blank room, no windows, just some coffee and some water. Used to be his typewriter. I think now he uses a laptop, but on writing, when he wrote that, it was just a typewriter. 6 hours a day, he doesn't leave. Nobody in his family interrupts him. If he sits there and writes, I don't know what to write, 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 for the whole 6 hours, that's what happens. But what he does is stay on the page. And when I read that, it reminded me of how I became a writer. I did the artist way. Most important takeaway I had from there was, I was wounded as a child and I can't journal, that's a bad idea. Oh my goodness, it's going to rain. But the most important thing I took away from the artist way was that the morning pages were a way to teach me how to stay on the page without editing myself, which is the key skill that stops everyone. Start doing morning pages. Start with 3 a day. After a couple of weeks, add 3 more. What the morning pages do is teach you to write without stopping and without an agenda. To write when the writing is bad, to write when the writing is good, to write when you're busy, to write when you're depressed, to write when you're angry, to write your way into becoming a writer. Because you're a writer because you write, not because you talk about it. You're not even a writer because you take classes. You're a writer because you write. And the more you write, the more you will write. It's plain and simple. That no matter what, for those 3 pages and that 20-minute span, you do nothing but stay on the page and write longhand. And you do it longhand because the brain is forced to focus on writing. Whereas if you're doing the typewriter on the laptop, it's moving as fast as your brain, right? Whereas when you write longhand, it's a meditation. More ideas pop up. And then because you're writing with your hand and your brain is moving really fast and your hand's communicating the ideas, your hand is then forced to make sense of what the brain is doing. It's like a backward psycho, meditative process that teaches you how to write. Because the page wants to be clearer than what's happening in your brain. And that's what your hand is trying to do. I wrote an entire play in a 48-hour period, only because I had been journaling about that play in morning pages, 12 pages a day for 3 years. The play was already written. Every single scene was happening in those morning pages. And I'll tell the other secret about morning pages. If you do them today and tomorrow and then don't do them for 3 days and then pick them up another day and then do... Stephen King, on writing. Every time you come to the page, the next day, your brain picks up where the story was because you were in the story by the end of those 6 hours. But if you skip 2 days, Your brain then has to go back to where you were 2 days previously. You've got to go back and read all the stuff that you wrote at the beginning of those 2 days just to help the brain remember where you were in the story, when you were on that burn and the story was moving and all the parts were fitting in. If you only get 10 minutes a day to write, write for 10 minutes. But don't let a day go by without writing. It is the continuity of daily coming to the page and learning how to stay on it, even when things are bad. The other part of the morning pages is that you don't edit them. I had written 600 or 700 pages. I had about 80 black and white composition books of morning pages before I ever went back and looked at any of them. And when I went back and looked at them, I didn't look at them to edit them. I looked at them for ideas and stories. I scanned and recurring ideas. Oh, loss of love. Oh, the little girl in the playground. Oh, the teacher, Mrs. Green. Ideas that kept coming back up, I put them in a wish jar and kept them for later, and those were the stories that became my first play. I didn't go back and edit the pages. I just used them as source material. Like a historian goes in and says, oh, well, let me look at the original folio, or let me look at the original document that was written in 1776 to get an idea. That's how I use the morning pages. Never edit them. And when I'm writing a play, I never edit until I'm finished an entire section. Like a whole act, right? If it's a screenplay, it's only 90 pages. Keep writing. And every time I come to a project that I'm in the middle of writing, I always go back to the beginning and spin through so that I can get back in the story. A lot of times I'll read it out loud and super fast so that I have now entered into the story as one of the characters because I'm reading it out loud. Super fast. I'm not editing it. I'm reading it for the action. That's it. Stay on the page. Don't edit. If you have a problem with that, never, ever, ever, ever go back to the top. Give it to a friend and let them read it. Having problems with the story and giving too much backstory, tape record yourself telling that story to a friend. When you got somebody that you need to make them understand it, you make the story active automatically. It also gives you a place to start writing, because if you do that, if you tape record that and then you transcribe it, guess what you're doing in the transcription process? You're writing. In Jane Cameron's The Right to Write, she says if you learn to think of writing as taking down dictation from the mouths of the characters, it becomes a whole lot easier. I'm sorry, what did you say? And then you went where? Oh my God, that's fantastic. And type. If you stay on the page long enough, they will start talking and give you dictation. You just have to create a ritual for yourself where you learn how to stay on the page daily. If you start with 3 pages a day, I promise you, it'll end up being 10. It'll end up being 15. It'll end up being 20. And then one day you'll be at a writer's retreat and you'll write an entire script in 2 days because you've been writing it and you've learned how to stay on the page and trust that the story is within you. The story is not within you going back and correcting words and correcting grammar. The story is in your determination to stay on the page, tell the story, be understood, communicate ideas and feelings such that the people who are reading it get the experience that you have of telling it. That's writing. That trust, that faith, and it's glorious. It's also a lot easier if you trust yourself to say, sometimes it's going to be bad writing. That's cool, great. Freeing yourself up to just write bad shit is good. Turn off that barometer. Just stay on the page. Because when you finish, you're a writer. Every day you come to the page, you're a writer. Every project that you finish, you are now 150 steps closer to having it produced. But until you make that commitment, every day, no matter what, you're not really a writer. You're just somebody talking about it. That's all I got. Please sign up for the writers group. The class will be tomorrow, 90 minutes. That's Thursday, 6 p.m. If you can't make it, if you sign up, we will send you the recording. We'll talk about these first 10 to 15 pages. We'll talk about learning how to stay on the page. We'll talk about not editing and freeing yourself up to do bad writing. We'll talk about I'm Simon Says Entertainment. Yes, we look for certain things from writers, but we also are trying to provide a service so that stories that need to be told get to be told. And anything that we can do to support that, we will. So help us help you. Talk to you soon. Bye.